Hello and welcome to the Car Automotive Reviews channel, and welcome to, what's this car again? Oh, this Tesla CyberTruck. We got a CyberTruck in the shop and we've been driving it for a few days. And in today's video, we're going to do a proper technical review of this car because it is a leap forward. I just have to say that from now. We're going to do a proper technical review. We can look underneath it, we're going to look inside and outside it, and talk about some things we like, some things we do not like right after this. Let's start our technical review of the CyberTruck under the hood. Well, there's actually no hood, it's actually a frunk because it's a storage area. But let's use our X-ray vision and kind of look behind the scenes, just like that. This is where the magic is. Folks, what you're looking at here doesn't really appear like much. You know, when you look at modern cars with gasoline engines and even electric cars, this doesn't look like much. This is the Tesla part. This is the marvel of Tesla. This is why they are successful. Not the rest of the car. The rest of the car is, some of them, close to junk. This is the part. This is the marvel. Let us get into it and you'll see why. See, when we review other electric cars, I always tell you things are rudimentary. Things are big and just unplanned and just strange. This is why. Because the level of engineering that goes on in this little section here, not only from a function standpoint, but from a packaging standpoint, like manufacturing as well. This system is not ahead of the rest of the competition by a mile. It's ahead by 10 miles. Let us dive into it, because it is, in my opinion, that every electric car is not really gauged by how big the battery is and whatever. It's the range for most folks, but how does it achieve the range that it does in various operating conditions is something had to do with their thermal management. How are we going to heat and cool the cabin? How are we going to heat and cool the battery? Because lithium-ion batteries, they do need to be at that perfect temperature to operate properly, not too hot, not too cold. So how do they manage that while staying efficient? Because it's very simple, just crank up the heaters, let's heat up everything. Well, that becomes counterproductive because you are drawing power from the battery to operate all these heaters, and it kind of, everything goes out the window. Here's how they managed to do this here. And not here, just this is not new. This is how they've always been doing it, but this is the latest iteration of it. There's something here called the super manifold. It's like a very innocent little thing. It's a super manifold version 2. This is the magic part. So Tesla uses the laws of thermodynamics. We're not going to get too much into them because things will get a little complicated. But basically, there is no such thing as cold. There is heat, there's more heat, there's less heat to a certain degree. So when things are very cold, well, where are you going to get the heat to warm up the cabin and warm up the battery? We're going to focus on the battery right now. We'll talk about the cabin in a whole section. The way they do this is they will leverage every bit of heat from this system, from this entire car, to heat the battery, to harness that heat and use it. The problem with that is, if you have a lot of hoses and just valves and you have all the loss of these exposed components, you're going to sacrifice that heat. And they're also going to leverage the refrigerant, which is the HVAC refrigerant, because you could easily generate heat from that. And then the powertrain, like the motor that drives the car, and the inverter that drives the car, that drives that motor that drives the car. There's one in the front, one in the rear. In this particular case, you're going to harness every little bit of heat to heat the battery when things are cold. And the way they do this, and this is why this is just unbelievable and unheard of. I mean, unheard of when this came out, and today it's still unheard of. The octo valve, which is a part of the super manifold, it's an 8-way valve that can not only direct coolant where it needs to go, it can also direct refrigerant where it needs to go at the same time. That, when you look at this tiny little super manifold, and the octo valve, here's a little picture of that. Looks such an insignificant part. It's just a tiny little block. And it is. That's the beautiful part. It is a tiny little block and an insignificant part. But the best part is, it's such a simple device, but the engineering to make it work and be so small and compact and work this good is what makes it special. The engineering that took just an unbelievable amount of time and cost to achieve, to get to this level. This is the magic of the Tesla, because there is not much going on here. That's the beauty of it. It's the design and the engineering behind it that made it work the way it does. It has so many cooling modes. It will harness heat from every single source just to not use an electric heater and cheat. That is cheating in electric cars when you use electric heater, because they're counterproductive. They don't do that here, especially in this latest iteration. So here are some of the components. We've talked about the super manifold, which is where all the magic happens. This is what harnesses all the heat, so this car would not need to turn on an electric heater in cold weather. Over here, this is a liquid condenser. So most gasoline cars and some other electric cars, they'll have a big condenser in front of the radiator, which this does have a radiator and a fan. You see it right here at the bottom, by the way. Just because they're closed in the front doesn't mean they don't have one. Yes, they do, and it's a very important one. But even that is slanted on its side to keep things small and compact, so you can have the frunk, because not a lot of electric cars actually have it. So this liquid condenser links the HVAC system in the loop. So now if we need to harness heat, we have it right here. We don't need to go all the way to the front, have another heat exchanger to take heat from the condenser and then send it all the way back, and the weather is cold, we're wasting all this energy. No, it's right here. Here's super manifold, here's that. That's the first thing. Second thing is, when things are hot and we need to cool the battery, well, you have the cooling system, that's fine, but you also have a battery chiller, which now we're gonna take heat away from the coolant in this little thing using refrigerant, and cool the coolant, which then is going to cool the battery. But you also notice that this is extremely close proximity of everything, and that is the biggest part, because you don't have giant herds of coolant hoses and refrigerant hoses going all the length of the car back and forth like many electric cars we see today. It's all here. There's no loss. And that's intentional. That's the best part. And you notice, you really visibly, all you see is two refrigerant lines going to this guy, which is the compressor. This is the electric AC compressor. That's the magic of the system. This is why Tesla is the best electric car engineering-wise in this department than anybody else. Because they figured this out. They went to the next level to keep things compact, but very well designed. Not necessarily for durability and all that. I hope this stuff is durable, but for function. You just have three components and a compressor. That's it. That's the entire thermal management system. You have some hoses going in the battery and back. Radiator is right here also. And because they were able to compact everything and put it in such a small package, you have the frunk. Many electric cars don't have that. They have a little tiny storage area, and that's it, because everything is massive. You have multiple three-way valves and all that. This has an 8-way valve that is tiny, tucked away. You don't even see it. It's tiny. That's the magic of this car, folks. And something else, this is something I noticed for the first time since the last one we looked at, which I believe was version 1 in a Model Y. They have a desiccant on the super manifold. That is pretty cool. Desiccant is basically a dryer for the HVAC refrigerant. They have it right here. It's just a very visible part. You just pull this cover, drain the refrigerant, of course, take one little clip, pull the desiccant out. Very simple. That is something new that I haven't seen in their previous systems. I believe this is maybe the version 2. Again, Tesla doesn't share a lot, which I don't blame them. This is marvel of engineering, folks. Let's talk about the heat pump system. So Tesla around 2021, 2022, they started slowly introducing heat pump in their cars. Prior to that, for the heating of the cabin, they used to have a PTC heater, very big PTC heater. They used to heat the cabins when things are very cold. Now they have a heat pump. In case you're not familiar with what a heat pump is, so it's the AC system. The hot side, the condenser is outside, and the cold side is inside, which is the evaporator. The heat pump system has the ability to flip that, where the hot side, the condenser, becomes inside, the cold side outside. Therefore, you can generate heat for the cabin. So here is the part of heat pump. See, when you look at heat pumps from any other manufacturer, it is this mega complicated thing with multiple hoses and multiple additional components and valves and this and that, and it is just a massive mess. Not here though. Because remember, we have that little innocent octo valve that can actually, I believe this is the version 2, don't quote me on this, but I believe that's what it is. They used that to make the heat pump work. So in reality, all they did here to add the heat pump system is add an additional condenser inside the car, where in addition, so you have the evaporator, and now you have an inside condenser, separate unit. They run 3 refrigerant line inside. That's it. That's all they needed to do, because the rest of it is actually switched by the super manifold. Because we already have it. Why are we going to make a whole separate system with valves and mess and all over the place? No, they use that. Not only that, they use that heat pump system to also leverage the laws of thermodynamics, to use it sometimes as a heat source to heat the battery through the octo valve. That is pretty brilliant. And here's the best part. Why is there 5 refrigerant lines going inside the cabin, not 4? See, most heat pump systems that have an inside condenser, they'll have 4 refrigerant lines. 2 of them for the evaporator when we're running AC. 2 of them are for the inside condenser when we're running heat. But why is this one has 5? And this is the brilliant part. So 2 of those 5 are for the evaporator. Those are standard. The other 3, 1 of them is a return. 2 of them are actually for each side. Because they figured, what if the driver is requesting less heat than the passenger? Well, we're actually going to give them a little bit of heat, and that the rest of that heat, we're going to cycle it back through the super manifold and use it to heat the coolant, which is going to heat the battery, and now we have a reserve of heat. They took things to the next level on the engineering side and the design, but not really component-wise, because you already have the AC compressor, which is right here, they all have it. You already have the super manifold, which has an 8-way octo valve that can switch things around and easily flip this AC system into a heat pump system and send the heat inside instead of cold. They just had to add a little condenser and 3 lines. And the positioning of all this made it, the lines just go from here to inside. Not running from here all the way and coming back to the condenser and the whole valves and the mess. No, they don't have that. This is a brilliant part. And something else they did specific to the CyberTruck, which is very interesting. The blower case or the blower motor housing is actually outside the car. This is where there's a little bit of an optical illusion with the CyberTruck. See, when you sit in the driver's seat, we'll show you that in a bit when we take a tour around it. When you sit in the driver's seat, there's literally a football field in front of you. Most folks will be like, why is there such a waste of space? That's actually an optical illusion because of the angle of the glass. Because the dash is actually very small and there's not enough space inside the cabin to put the housing that has the evaporator and the inside condenser and all the blend doors and everything and the blower motor. There's not enough space. So they had to put it outside. Because if you look in, this area is it goes so much further in than just here. Then you realize half of that dash is actually outside the car. not inside. So it's not technically a big dash, it's just the angle of the glass that makes it look like that. But here's the benefits and the drawbacks of having actually a blower case outside the car. Biggest benefit is the noise levels. The fan itself, just operating, makes a lot of noise. When you have it inside the car, you're gonna hear it. Well, this one's outside the car, so you won't hear it as much, and that is pretty cool. Something interesting about CyberTruck, if you're not familiar, the cabin filters, because there's actually two of them, they're right here. There's a big panel that sits here, you pop it, it's right here. There's a little door because your blower case is right here. That's pretty cool. Now the drawback of this, because you have the blower outside and you're trying to move this air inside the car, you have to have a very good seal for air not to escape through the bulkhead. Because you're sending this air from outside here, inside the cabin, and then through the ducts. So the ducting is a little bit complicated. The seal that happens between them so air wouldn't escape is a little bit complicated. That is the only complication that was added. But again, unless you have issues, we're never going to have to deal with it. And that is the cool part. This is just, yeah, the engineering here, folks, is just amazing. This heat pump system makes other heat pump systems seem rudimentary, experimental, kind of like, why is this so complicated? This is so simple. Because the engineering is behind it is just beautiful. Another breakthrough with the CyberTruck is the 48 volt system. And folks, we're not talking about some redundant, horrible 48 volt system like you'll find in Mazda did one, Mercedes did one. They just do nothing, literally do nothing. They're just a sad attempt at a hybrid. This is not a separate voltage system. There is no 12 volt battery in this car. There is a 48 volt battery. Do you remember back in the olden days when we used to run cars on 6 volts and then we switched to 12? And that's been the case ever since. This has a 48 volt system with a 48 volt main vehicle battery. That's amazing. And there is a very logical reason behind it for both function and production. Let's dive into it. So if our resistance stays the same, but our voltage increases, our current is going to decrease. What that means is we don't have to run huge wires for components that require a lot of amperage, because they're not going to require a lot of amperage because they have higher voltage. That is the cool part. So I'll give you a prime example of that is right in front of us here. This wiper motor is a massive wiper motor that operates this giant wiper that goes up and down. Just look at the wires that go to it right here. Tiny little wires going to it that operate it. You see the point? Normal 12 volt cars, wires this size, will maybe power up your interior lights. Wiper motor on a car, which has half the size of this wiper motor, will have double the wire size. That's the whole point. Here's how they did this to kind of leverage things and make them work. For example, the tonneau cover in the back that operates effortlessly. It runs on 48 volts, but not everything runs on 48 volts because certain things, they're low load. There's no point of operating them on 48 volts and reinventing the wheel for them. For example, interior lights. I mean, they're just lights. But the outside lights, they are run on 48 volts because usually they step up the voltage to get them to work in normal cars, but here we're already at 48 volts, so we don't have to. So here's how they did this with other components, and they actually run on 15 volts, which is kind of interesting. Not even, they're like, again, we are against 12 volts, we're going 15 volts, not. So they step down the voltage to get it to 15 volts. Unclear how they are doing that. Do they have a DC-DC converter? How are they doing that? It is unclear. We really try to dig into it. There are theories out there with some specific circuits that are doing this and capacitors and whatnot. It's unclear because Tesla doesn't publish this, which I don't blame them. This is a marvel of engineering. But the coolest thing is the battery. I tried my best to find a price on this battery. I couldn't. But here's the coolest thing. It's a lithium ion 48 volt battery that sits right here. Tiny, isn't it? Knowing that this is a 48 volt battery and it's so small. And it sits right here. Again, doesn't take a lot of space, because the whole point is we save on the whole wiring and the whole mess. Well, this battery is right here and it goes out. And notice something. Go to your regular gasoline car and look at the battery terminals. You'll see this massive wire coming out of the battery going to like the main feed of the battery. Look at this one. Yeah, that's not massive at all. Again, same principle. We don't have high current because we have high voltage. That is the cool part. Let's talk about the steer-by-wire of the Cybertruck, because it is one of the just strange things about it. So here's the thing with this. There has been other cars that have steer-by-wire, but they have mechanical backup. So if something fails, you're mechanically connected, we're good. This, on the other hand, is the next level. It has no mechanical backup whatsoever. There is absolutely no connection between the steering column and the steering rack. Period. Nothing. No backup, nothing. So the biggest question you will ask is this safe? That's a very valid question. We're all gonna be wondering about that. But let's dive into how it's actually constructed, and then we'll answer that question a little bit later. So the steering column has a few things on it. It's a normal steering column, but it doesn't attach to anything at the end. So you have a variety of sensors that tell it what kind of input are you giving, so it would know how much steering do you need. And then it also has a force feedback motor. And the last time I heard this word is when you're playing your video game and you have a little steering thing, that also has a force feedback motor. What that does is the computer will take your input and then it'll look at the conditions of the road and how much we're turning the wheel and everything, and it's actually going to activate that motor to give you, the driver, a feeling of what the car is doing. But it's actually all just to give you a feel. It's actually not real because you have no mechanical connection. The reason there are multiple sensors, there are redundancies. We're going to talk about that in a second. Now let's go to the rack itself. The rack has two motors instead of one. One is active. Although it seems from the text it's unclear, this part don't quote me on, they seem to work sometimes one or the other or both at the same time, but there's two backups that have their own separate circuits. They're of course 48 volts, so we don't have massive wires going to them. And then even the communication wire going from the rack to the computer, they're actually doubled as a redundancy. The rest of it is all software, folks. Just looking at various inputs and then making an output to turn the wheel. This has also rear steering. We'll talk about that in a bit. But is this safe? That's pretty scary. I mean, hey, we live in the real world here. Is this safe? Let's talk about it. And the answer to that is yes and no. Let's talk about the yes first. Do you know this little giant behemoth that we all fly on almost every single day? Do you think this giant airliner has a steering shaft where the pilot turns it, the rudders or whatever that turns? Do you think that has mechanical connection? It does not. And that does not carry 5 passengers in it. That carries hundreds of people every single day. And the way they do that is redundancies, folks. If something fails, there's something immediately to take over. It's just engineering. Engineering never heard of in a car before, but it's there. It's there for a while in the aviation industry. So this has similar redundancies, and in some cases, over redundancies, because the steering rack doesn't have 2 sensors to know which position it's at. It has 3. That's actually overkill, if you ask me. But that's how they wanted it done, because they wanted things to be safe. Now, is it safe? No. This is the problem. This is a car. An airplane is an airplane. Airplanes get inspections after inspections and checklists and pre-flight checklists and whatever you call it constantly. Is the Cybertruck going to do that? Owners? I hope so. because your life may depend on it. Because if the second redundancy fails and you decide not to do anything about it, yeah, that's the only problem with this. So I am hoping, and we'll talk about this truck, what it is in a bit, I am hoping the people that buy these cars, they understand that part, that you gotta service these things and get them inspected at the appropriate time, because you have no mechanical connection at all. Now, the good benefit of that is you don't have a steering shaft, because that's another component that actually takes a lot of space and really dictates where things are gonna be. But here, you can position the column in any place, and you can position the steering rack at any place, and they don't have to be in line and perfectly engineered, or the steering shaft. You don't have to. You just put them anywhere you want. Now, the rear steering on this car, it's pretty simple. There's a lot of cars with rear steering, and we never had issues there. Some of them actually don't have redundancies, by the way. This one has rear electric steering rack. Just turns the wheel, computer commands it opposite direction, so you can make very sharp turns. Works really well. Steering feel on this is strange, and it does have a small learning curve. I was actually very concerned when we got this. Is this going to be comfortable? Like, we're going to have to take it slow. But actually, after driving it for 15-20 minutes, you get used to it. Just don't turn the wheel all the way, it'll just jump. You make small inputs, and it's actually very comfortable to drive. I have to say that in the rear steering, any car with the rear steering, the turning circle is super sharp. This is a very long car, and the turning circle is very sharp, and that is pretty cool. Let's take a tour underneath the CyberTruck. I just can't believe we're saying that still. Let's look at the front suspension here. So it's a very interesting setup. You know what this setup reminds me of? Chrysler. Let's watch the small details. There's no cotter pins on the ball joints. That is something that I've only seen Chrysler do. Same thing here. This one you can't see it, but reaching in, there's no cotter pin. It's just this nut has a little rubber sleeve inside of it that it gets kind of formed and it locks it. That's how these lock. But here is the more interesting stuff. You notice the knuckle is aluminum, lower control arm is aluminum, upper control arm is steel. The knuckle itself is aluminum, of course. The tie rod is aluminum as well. But here's the interesting part. If you notice, the finish on this one looks very nice. This one looks horrendous. This particular knuckle says made in China. It says Tesla, made in China. Somewhere in this vicinity. We'll get you a closer shot. So I don't get that part. And that's, yeah. It's covered in plastic, the control arm, because when this truck is on the ground, this will go up and it'll be perfectly flat, and that's really what they're trying to do here. We come around here to this massive caliper. It's actually a 4-piston caliper. It looks massive, but it's a 4-piston caliper. It's not a 6-piston caliper in this particular model. Axles in the front, they are pretty big, beefy axles. I have one small thing about them, though. I really like the finish of them, but this part is painted, which is nice. But if you look at the inside, it's actually not painted, and that's how that's how they save a few bucks. That's okay. Got a big, heavy shield here. Looks like somebody, this particular model, have taken it a little too off-road. Dented that, not a big deal. Everything is here. This is the part we looked at. Everything is under. This is what covers it from the bottom. This car is completely flat at the bottom. You will not see a lot of cars like that. This is a battery, which is actually part of the body, and that is a very interesting part. I admire one thing about this. It has normal lift points. So where you lift this, it just says lift point right there. And it's a very clear, no special tools, nothing required, and I like that. I'm noticing, like if you look here, they have these stretches of glue. There I have a giant opening gap. I don't know what's that about. Maybe this is a drain, but it's just interesting that they would miss it intentionally. And same deal here. We were wondering what this is. I'm wondering if this is some kind of something in the factory attaches to this rail, or it's just a kind of a structural piece. It's kind of interesting shape and has these cutouts. They look very intentional cutouts, which is interesting. Then we go to the back here. Same thing, everything's completely covered. This shield, very strong. This one, still strong, but not as strong as the other one for some reason. You notice the same deal here, plastic cover on the control arm, so when this goes up, it actually becomes flat with the body when you're driving straight, and that's what they're trying to do. Similar stuff in the rear suspension, like you can see this one very clear on the knuckle, horrible finish on this one. Not knocking the folks in China there, but does say very clearly made in China. So there is that. This is a rear steering, so the rack sits somewhere in this area. And you just see regular tie rods. That's how the rear steering happens. Pretty simple, nothing out of this world. Same thing where we don't have cotter pins in the back. I've only seen Chrysler do that. And then here's the interesting stuff. So this has air suspension. We kind of glanced over it, but I want you to see this. So the shock part of the air shock here is made by Bilstein. That's pretty interesting. The more interesting part is, you can't see it on this one, but I'll show you a little picture of it. The airbag part of the air suspension, like the rubber part, the bag itself, is actually made by Firestone. We caught the little logo Firestone. That's pretty interesting that they have two companies like that working together. So that's the source of that. Everything else is really well covered. That's the thing. I mean, you can barely see the axle. We can see it from this angle. Here it is. So this axle is the same deal. This part is painted, that part is not. You see it's already rusted. Not a huge deal, but this is the little stuff where they cut cost and get away with it, if you would. Again, super beefy axle. Of course, this has instant torque. I'm actually, I have to say something. I'm surprised. Other than the very cheap looking knuckles, I was expecting a lot of weird stuff underneath here. Not really. That is something to be said, because when we talk about the rest of the car, that is not the case. But this is the underneath of the Cybertruck. Of course, everything else is covered here. Looks like a speaker. I believe it is a speaker for the outside sound. Just has a perfect speaker look. Or Tesla is listening to our conversation right now. That's also a possibility, but this is underneath the Cybertruck. Let me show you a few interesting things. We got it halfway. I want to show you this. This is a very thin upper controller arm. It's like not boxed, it's empty at the bottom. More interestingly, made in USA. I love that part. Rear-wheel drive. Well, this one is all-wheel drive, so what's going on here? Moving past that into more serious stuff. Do you notice how simple the assembly of this thing is? You put this control arm, not right here, not right here, not right there, not right there. I'm assuming when they assemble this fender liner is not here. That's it. We don't need to make this rocket science, folks. Some manufacturers really go to lengths to make this complicated. This is simple. I like that. I see a lot of that in this and other Teslas. Let's look at here. I don't know what exactly is this giant contraption that loops and goes back, but we got a brake line here, and I still don't understand what this exactly does, but that's how this is. But you notice something else. This is the air shock, and this is the air line that connects to it. I like this style connection. We've seen manufacturers that use a push clip and plastic, and some really good manufacturers will use a little plastic clip that's a pain. This one, it's a fitting that is screwed on. It's a metal fitting. That is pretty cool. See, it's not all bad in Tesla land until we get to the next section. Let's talk about the rest of the Cybertruck. And we cannot do anything without talking about the way it looks. Look, I admire one thing about this truck, and Tesla in general. The bravery. I mean, this straight looks like a 9-year-old drew a picture of a car and they just decided, let's make it, let's do it. And I don't understand how they were able to actually make this a safe car, where you run into somebody, it's not going to hurt them. Because according to Tesla, it does have a good safety rating. But here is something about this truck. All new cars, they all look the same. They're just different logo, different curve here, different. They all look the same. Even exotic cars look the same these days. The few days that I've been driving this truck, I mean, you will drive the most expensive, most rare, most exotic car in the planet, and you will not get half the reaction that people get when they see this. I mean, just look at it. It's unbelievable. How can a company come out with a car that looks like this? There's something about the Cybertruck that I'd like to share with you. There's nobody that will say, oh, it's just a car. Okay. Nobody will say that, even non-car people, even people who don't even drive a car. They see this, they're either gonna absolutely love it beyond anything, or they're gonna not love it beyond anything. I have to admit that I am one of those people that don't love it beyond anything. It's too flashy, too much, but I still admire the level of bravery. It's a matter of taste, but I love the bravery. There will be nothing that looks like this. The Pontiac Aztek, we always say it's a very strange looking car. Oh, this thing takes it to the 17th million next level. I mean, just look at it. Unbelievable how this looks. The shape is the most radical, interesting shape you will ever see on a car. I think today, past, and future. Unless Tesla decides to come up with something even more crazy than this, I don't think you'll ever see something this out there. Brave, that's what I'm going to say. Unfortunately, with that come a huge cost. And this is not just this happens to be one of the worst ones on the outside at least, but the build quality and the rest of the car and the reality of living with a car that looks like this. Start with the body, for example. This is a stainless steel body, which is, there's one statement about it. There's a reason manufacturers don't make stainless steel bodies, and we reserve that for refrigerators, because it is horrendous to keep it clean. I mean, absolutely horrendous to keep it clean. It's just not practical at all. That's why nobody's done it long. The car I remember was a DMC DeLorean. That was the last thing that I at least remember. But nobody makes it for a good reason, and we're going to talk about that. But beyond that, there's a few problems with stainless steel bodies. First one is keeping them clean is impossible. Second thing is they happen to wave. You look at the side profile of this truck, it's wavy all over the place. And that is not bad build quality. That's just how stainless steel is. When you put it in giant panels like this, it is just impossible to keep the panel flat. That's just the problem with stainless steel. But the bigger problem with stainless steel is the cleanliness. There are so many Cybertrucks in the area where I live. I see at least 5. I see one of them every single day that I drive in my neighborhood. 4 of these 5 are wrapped. One of them black, one of them I think red. There's all kinds of different colors, because this is impossible to clean. I mean, watch this. You look at this panel. I put my fingers here. They already left all kinds of marks that you can see. I don't know if you can see them on camera. They're just unbelievable. And they're not simple to just wipe it down. You have to get, the owner of this car basically told us, get rubbing alcohol, wipe it down, that's the only way. And they'll be all over the place. That's the first problem. But the bigger problem, and the real problem is, stainless steel is not supposed to be, the edges are not supposed to be exposed. They're supposed to be rolled or covered with some kind of trim. These are not. So you end up with things like this. This is a very sharp edge. And if you really look close, you can actually see the cut marks, and they look horrible. That is the problem with stainless steel. If we would have rolled this, which is very difficult to do and very expensive, or put a trim here to cover the edge. I mean, I just caught my finger. This is a very sharp edge, folks. You get into one of these cars, like if we open the door here, this is very sharp. You by accident catch yourself on this or an edge, this will hurt. It could actually hurt you. The only thing I will say is, do you see how this one has an edge? Has a rubber trim on it? This is how you're supposed to do the entire thing. But of course, Tesla deemed it, well, we're going to make this car and we don't care. That's how they did that. And then look at the, you'll see this all over the place. They didn't even bother hiding it or anything. And my absolute favorite thing is this panel right here that runs across. This is such just a strange cut. right here, which gives this truck the shape, the drawing of the 9-year-old. If you come close here, this is with the super cost cutting. What exactly happened here? I mean, I can literally see this cut underneath, and it's not even straight. It looks like somebody was like, okay, this is the prototype. You see how it wiggles? It's literally glued on. Somebody decided, okay, we're doing this prototype. Let's just stick this panel here just to get the shape so we can see it. Then we make production. No, that's how the production car is. It is horrendous. There is no other way to say it. We look at the other side, and that's the best part. If you don't like one side, go look at the other side. It's completely different. This one, completely different. This panel actually overlaps the other one doesn't. And yeah, this entire panel just moves. And it's very sharp. It's already digging through my skin. That's the problem. And then the very, very Tesla quality panel gaps and everything. It is all over the place. I mean, this is here. You see how I can catch my hand here? Let's go to the other side. I can't do that here because it's actually higher. I can catch my hand on this side. It is all over the place. Only Tesla can get away with things like that on their cars, especially a car that costs $101,000. Moving on past that. Here is the best way to describe the body of this car. Actually, everything else with the car that we haven't talked about to this point. They put this car together, especially the body, with 5-year-old dollar store glue. And I say 5-year-old glue because they announced this truck in 2019. They didn't sell it till the end of almost 24. So it took them 5 years. I think when they announced it is when they bought the cheap glue, and it's already $1 glue and it got expired. And, yeah, let's just use it. And there's something about Tesla that is the best part. They don't care. They don't do what people want or what is convenient or what makes sense. No, they just do their thing, their way. This is a prime example, is the mirror. They made this mirror like that. The only purpose of it is to match the just crazy design of this car. Here's the thing about this mirror. This part, the tall part, which you can actually see out of, because it's actually tall, is the part nobody uses. Most people, the most used view area of the mirror is right here. Well, this one doesn't have it. So basically, you might as well not have mirrors. I think they put these simply for compliance, so they can sell the car, because it's useless. Now, this has cameras, this has all the advanced, and I understand. But why do we put a mirror? Because it's useless. That's the truth. Then the doors. You have a little touch area right here. Notice what happens to the door. It pushes itself and the glass goes up and it comes down again. And that is intentional. I don't understand why the glass comes up when you open the door, but my theory is when the door is loose, I think this glass sits all the way at the bottom of the structure. So if you kind of maneuver this hard, it might hit and break the glass or do something to it. So they had to lift it up a little bit. This is not confirmed. But watch the glass. This is actually a double pane glass. And this is something we talked about when we talked about the 48 volt system. This is a very heavy glass. And it goes up in a hurry. You see how fast that is? That is pretty cool. We'll look at the inside in a bit, but let's continue our tour, which it comes down. That is pretty cool. Now, gaps are all over the place. This panel, if they wanted to do this properly and brave, and even to the level of how much this costs, this panel, and the front would be one panel. Or you'd have some kind of transition here that breaks it. But no, they just left it here, just wiggling about. They don't care. That's just how Tesla does things. You do have these wheel arches and double mud flap. Just why not? Just because. Let's move away to the back. And this is where, the truck part. I'll start with this. You can do better here, but that's how Tesla does things. Big bed that is actually not usable because we'll talk about this a little bit. If you think you will buy this and use it as a truck, please reconsider. This is not a truck. This is a CyberTruck. This is a leap, a demo of technology, basically. So you have these really cool lights. These are actually 48-volt lights. That's why they're very distinct color, and they're huge, and they're actually really nice. I wish normal trucks would have that. But you do have a little storage area here that is not lockable because you have the tonneau cover. Speaking of the tonneau cover, that's the tonneau cover. Now I want you to notice something. Let's open it. It's 48-volt, by the way. That's why it comes off very, very rapidly. It's great. Don't get me wrong, it's great. The cool thing is, we have to be fair here. Compared to a normal truck with a tonneau cover, you do have more space because it's not flat, straight. It's actually up, so you can put taller stuff in there and cover them from the weather. But here's the problem. Do you notice the gleaming absence of your rear view mirror window? Yes, the tonneau cover actually covers it. So when I open it, and it finally goes away, there's my glass in the back. So this is, of course, it takes away your rear view. Again, I don't know how they were able to get away with that, but they did. It does have a camera all the time, which works fine. But the cool thing is you can open the tonneau cover as you're driving. So if you don't want to use the camera, you want to use the actual mirror, which is just a hilarious mirror, we'll look at it in a sec, you can actually open it when you're driving from the screen, which is pretty cool. Speaking of the screen, let's go look inside it. So here's the interior of the CyberTruck, and I do have to say one thing. It is an improvement over the last Tesla we looked at, which was a 21, I believe, Model Y. Things were just horrendous inside. I mean, unbelievably horrendous. This is better. Not to the automotive industry standard, but this is a lot better. The truth have to be said. The infotainment screen here, which is, no, I don't want to call it infotainment. This is everything. This is the entire car. There's absolutely nothing else. This is everything. This is possibly the best screen you can ever have in a car. It is, every time you discover something new here, you think, wow, this is so innovative. It is a lot more innovative than that. It is just unbelievable, the level of attention to detail that they went to with the screen. That is the end of the screen conversation, and actually the interior, because there isn't much. So here's the thing about the CyberTruck. You don't have, like, if we go to the car screen, you don't have a shifter or anything. You have in the screen, you can just put it up to reverse, put it down, like you can just do this deal, and it's going to reverse, and you do this deal, it'll drive. Sorry, this is reverse, that's forward. See, it's already throwing me off. But you can also touch here. Now the car is off, but you can touch here, and it'll also appear. It's a touch capacitive, so you can put it park, neutral, drive, whatever have you. Now the steering wheel, it's this yoke thing. Initially when I looked at it, I'm like, this is very annoying. It's actually not, because that's as far as it turns, and that's as far as it turns. That's it. There is no more, because it's steering by wire, as we talked about. So I can understand the yoke's actually not annoying to drive, because you're not turning it a lot. Now the turn signals are on the steering wheel, which is, that's not a first for Tesla. Some Ferraris actually had that, and some exotics, but the interior is actually better than I anticipated, and that is nice. It's nowhere near as chiseled as some cars of this price, but if you look, for example, at the headliner, it is a nice suede. I actually do like the way it's put together. It's put together well. Now this massive angle that you have here and this massive pillar that you have here absolutely blocks your view and feels like you're looking through a tunnel. And looking at the dash, this entire dash, and we talked about this a little bit, it's literally a mile long, but you have to, there is a optical illusion here, because this is where the actual dash ends. The rest of it, that's actually outside the car. I hope that makes sense, because if you look here and then you look down, that is the end. This part is outside. Does that make sense? This is where the bulkhead is, and that's because of the angle of the roof. That is why that is the case. So just thought you'd see this, because you see it, oh, why is this a mile long? It's actually not, and that's the interesting part. Then we get to the parts that are, yeah, this just doesn't have anything to attach it down. It just sits there. That's fine. And then there's this little panel thing here. So it's a little tray for storage, a decent size center console. But here's the best part. You put this, it's such an afterthought that if you just put any weight in it, it just falls in. So what can I exactly put here? A couple feathers. Yeah, that's, just leave that there. Now, the roof of the CyberTruck is all glass, but what I like about it is it doesn't have any way to close it, but it does block the sun, and that part is a good part. Now the sun visors is very interesting. So they remind me of like the iPad, like little cover. You kind of fold like this, and then this little thing with the mirror folds, and you can, it has a magnet here. You know what? Initially this looks very cheap and chintzy, but it's actually, it does feel nice. I am glad to see Tesla moving toward making things better. They're nowhere near there, but because the seats comfortable, but very generic and basic. That's the way I'll put it. They are power and whatnot. But let's move to the back, because that's when I have a small problem. Very comfortable back, very roomy, and I do like that part. You got a little screen here, which is super intuitive as well. I mean, yeah, this is why, this is the second reason after the electric system and the innovation in technology behind the scenes that you buy a Tesla or CyberTruck as well. But here's the problem. This is an armrest that I can put down and enjoy. Well, it moves a little bit, but it doesn't want to come down. So you have to actually pull this strap and then listen to the sound it makes. Are you serious right now? I just spent $100,000 and this is how it sounds like. There is no car on the planet that sounds like that, except this one, maybe other Teslas, but this is the stuff they don't do well. Not because they can't. I mean, this is a marvel of technology. You think they can't figure this out? No, they just don't care about this stuff. This is unimportant. That's how Tesla is. But that's the tour of the inside. We only have one thing I want to show you on the outside before we move on, which is the massive wiper. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say this. I might be wrong. Doesn't matter. We're talking about Tesla here. Nothing matters. This is possibly the biggest wiper blade I've ever seen in my life, and possibly period. So just to give you a perspective, this is how big this wiper is. This is massive. This basically looks like two very large wipers connected together. You can only imagine how expensive it is. Works great. It actually has the washer jets inside of it. You can see them from the side if you come around here. You can see them right here. They do not make a mess when they clean. You see them one here. They're spread across it. There's multiple. They just very fine mist when you operate them. It just pretty cool. I have to say, this is actually a cool idea, although it slightly stands in your way, and when you operate it, at some point it'll stand here waiting for the next cycle in case there's rain. But hey, it works. You have one wiper. It probably costs the same as 5 wipers of a normal car, but it's a leap. It's a tech demo. That's what I'm going to call this. Let's talk about some notable features, and it's kind of interesting little stuff with the CyberTruck. Starting with the door. You notice, so there's no handle. There's this little area here you push. You see how the door comes out? If you try to push it, it actually won't let you close it until you open it. Do you hear that sound? I want to show you something. When you close, we're going to simulate the door closed. Watch this. We're going to close all the way. There we go. See? There we go. Do you see that little rod? So right now I have the latch closed, so the car thinks that the door is closed. Watch what actually pushes it out for you when I open it. It's actually this little rod comes out. That is pretty cool. So that's what's preventing you from actually open, like closing the door again. So you have to swing it. As soon as you swing it, it comes back in. That is actually pretty cool. And the next thing is, what if you're inside the car? I mean, this is a button that opens the door. What if you're inside the car and you have an electrical failure, for example? Let's simulate that outside. I'm going to close the latch. So right now the latch is in its closed position. If you push this button, it'll open. That's the normal. But what if we have an electrical failure? It actually gives you a manual release right here. You just pull it up. This actually manually opens the doors, and that is on the front doors, but for some reason not on the back door. And that's just how Tesla did it. If you look close at the bed, there's this little door. I feel like they actually intended to make a real truck here, because if you open this, you have two power outlets, and it says 240 volts. Is that basically a 220 outlet in the back? That's actually pretty cool. I wish other trucks would have this too. Another thing is, in case you, for whatever reason, you are inside the bed and you lose electrical power and the bed door is closed, you actually have a manual release right here. It's kind of an interesting manual release. So you have these two little cables or handles here. They actually operate two individual cables, one for each latch of the bed. So if I close this, we lost electrical power, we want to open the bed, you can actually open these loops. If you pull both of them, the bed will open. That's an interesting way to do it with two pull straps here. So the CyberTruck also has possibly the world's smallest rear view mirror. And look at this thing. It's such a little cutie pie. But the reason for that is, if you look in the back right now, I can't see anything. That's because the tonneau cover is closed. But if I open it, and we wait for it to roll down, now we can see. So that's why you have this, because they actually, as you drive, you can actually see the rear view in the screen. So you don't really need this little cute mirror, but I guess they had to put it for safety regulations or what have you. And also the CyberTruck has air suspension, as we looked at when we looked underneath it. It's actually pretty interesting because it's very rapid. Usually air suspension comes down very fast, but it takes the time to go up. This one is extremely rapid, both up and down. Check it out. Most people assume that this big light right here is the headlight of the CyberTruck. That's actually not the case. The headlights are all the way down here. Let's take a look at that. So, the CyberTruck. I just have to say one thing about this car. This is not a car or a truck or whatever you want to call it. This is a tech demo. This is a demonstration of what happens when a company is run by brilliant engineers that are giving no limits. No PR department, no legal, no nothing. Just the engineering department. That's the entire budget. Please go to town. Boys and girls, go to town. And go to town they did, with a few things in this car. Not everything though. The electric system in this car and just the innovation of things behind the scenes are class leading. There is nothing will come even close to where Tesla's at with their electric system. And then in addition to that, in this particular model, the things that they took to the next level with their 48 volt system, it's all an experiment, folks. I don't think you will see this stuff trickle to other cars because this is an experimentation at their best level and brilliant. There's certain things in this car that you'll never see in other cars. And that's the whole point. But here is the problem, though. When you give the engineers rein, they will spend their entire budget and then some on the stuff you will never see. So then we are left with, what about the rest of the car? Because people will not drive a bunch of a beam with stuff on it and some wires and a battery. What about the rest of the car? So they have very little budget, I feel like. So they enlisted the cheapest designer to design this car, which is a 9-year-old boy. He drew a little shape of a car, but it turned out great. I just have to say it. I mean, this is the most exciting car, looks-wise, and the bravest design I have ever seen in my life. And I think before my life, if those who are older can attest, and the younger generation, unless they come up with something even more than this. I don't like how it looks, but that doesn't matter. What matters is this is a brave move. But now that we have gotten away from that cloud and back to the real world, let me say one thing. If you look at this and consider it or own one and you are going to use this as a truck, yeah, no. You can't use this as a truck. I'm sorry, I just have to say this. Because first, the price. I mean, if this was $60,000, $70,000, we can live with that. Maybe you can swing it. Okay, it's horrendous in every level, even as a truck, but hey, we can swing it. But $100,000 plus, and then the prices when they sell in the second hand, because this is the coolest thing in the planet. Yeah, let's forget about the truck part. However, it is the coolest gimmick to come out in 2023, 2024. That has to be said. Certain gimmicks are unnecessary and just forget about it. This is a cool gimmick because it has a great technology. It's a demo of what could be if engineers really get the reins in an automotive manufacturer. That's never the case, by the way. The day that people will actually use trucks like this as a work truck is the day we have flying cars. I don't want to be around for that day. Thank you very much. But this is a very cool demo. I take it as a demo. I don't think it'll ever be a work truck. You know, you guys have all watched, we've all watched Whistling Diesel and the thing rip out in the back. Oh my God, this is horrible. Well, I hope you're not planning to use it as a real truck because you'll be very disappointed. That's a problem. And the build quality is horrendous elsewhere, but where the things behind the scenes is where it's at, maybe not build quality wise, but engineering and kind of design, and they really went to the next level, and that is very impressive, and they have to get that credit because it's the truth. This was a very interesting experiment for me. It was an experiment for me. Usually when I see one of these on the street, I just look at it, it's like, this is a big waste of $100,000, but I see the point. I understand. It's a big gimmick. And usually folks who will buy it, I hope they are buying it because it's a very brave design and it is very technologically advanced. That part, yes. But don't buy it as a work truck. This is not a work truck. Sorry, folks. It's the truth. If you disagree all you want, but buy this for the right reasons and you will actually enjoy it because it's super cool and it'll bring a lot of attention because it is the coolest gimmick of 2024. And I think for a while, unless they come out with something else that is even more. Can't wait for that. That'll be very interesting. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you. And you have yourself a wonderful day.